Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Scott Dill with Real Story Group, and welcome to our first webinar of the new year, and Happy New Year to all of you. We're going to focus today on our digital marketing and digital workplace technology predictions for the coming year. Always an exciting topic for us, and it's always great to see such a big crowd like we have today. So thank you for taking a half hour out of your days to join us for the presentation. Just a couple of quick notes for all the attendees here. You will be receiving a copy of this slide deck, and for our subscribers, this will be available to you in your subscriber library as a recorded presentation over the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. My colleague Jared Jingles will be on the line with us momentarily, but first I just want to walk you through a little bit about Real Story Group. I see some new faces and some familiar faces on the line, so I just wanted to give you a quick high-level look at who we are and what we do. So fundamentally, we're an industry analyst firm. We cover 8 different marketplaces that focus on digital workplace and digital marketing technology. You'll see here on the screen web content management, our latest offering, customer data platforms, and we're different in that we are analyzing them through the buyer's perspective only. We don't do any work for the vendors we cover. We don't speak at their conferences or write white papers for them or advise them in any way. That way, we're providing you with the real story about what the vendors do well, but perhaps more importantly, what they don't do so well and where they could maybe fall short for you. So as we move along here, this is a more descriptive view of the vendors we cover in those particular marketplaces we listed earlier. So you'll see here, there are certainly some platform providers that you'll see in the middle, those hubs like the Microsoft and Oracle of the world. But then you'll see the best of breed solutions that are more on the periphery of the map, that are focused on just that particular technology, whether it be digital asset management or customer data platforms. So an interesting way for you to take a look at the vendors we cover and the different marketplaces where they fall into place. So how we work with our customers and the way that we utilize our time with our subscribers is through a couple of different ways. First, it's our self-service or standard subscriptions, where you can actually access our research on a marketplace or several marketplaces. And then as part of that, we also have advisory time that you can spend with our analysts like Jared. And then we also work on a select number of consulting projects throughout the year. So certainly if you have questions about our subscriptions, you can ask those in the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll get back to you after today's presentation. And you're always welcome to reach out to us as well directly. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our Managing Director, Jared Jingles, who's going to walk us through today's predictions webinar. So Jared?
Thanks, Scott, and happy 2019, everyone, and thank you all for being with us today, as always, and a special thank you to our subscribers on the call today. I know there's a bunch of you, and it's because of you, because of your support, that we're able to retain that level of independence that Scott mentioned. You know, we work solely for you. We don't work for software vendors, and I hope you keep that in mind as we go through the predictions, and I hope you see that shines through all of our analysis that we publish throughout the year. So before we start our 2019 predictions, which is always a bit of a humbling exercise for us, but a fun one nonetheless, I do have to start with a disclaimer. You know, as always, there's a fine line between what we call prediction and aspiration. So for some of the 10 predictions that I'm about to walk you through, there might be some things that we think we might wish that happened, and in some cases that we think are a real probability that they do happen. But nonetheless, let's jump right into some of these predictions that we think will occur in 2019. This is actually an exercise that we've been doing for the last, I think, 10 or so years now. So if you are interested in our previous results on this exercise, feel free to go to the blog page on the realstorygroup.com website or do a search for predictions on the site, and I think you'll see we've been right sometimes, and we've been a little off on others, but we're always pretty honest about where we land. So let's get started with the first prediction of 2019, and this first one has to do with web content management. Our prediction is that web content management is going to get skinnier for many enterprises. So what does that mean? Well, what we're looking at here is more of a traditional view of someone's technology stack. And in this technology stack, it represents kind of how big CMS vendors want you to think about web content management in your marketing stack. So if you see that green line in the stack, what you're seeing here is their view that web content management should be your central hub of your overall digital engagement. And I bet many of you on the line, just like many other folks that we talk to on an ongoing basis, have followed that path and have built out large and sometimes unwieldy infrastructures around web content management as that hub. And our prediction here is that there's a bit of a backlash against web content management being that end-all be-all engagement hub. So instead, what we're seeing in 2019, or what we think will happen in 2019, is a more nuanced architecture, if you will, where web content management is just a piece of that overall engagement puzzle. Now, so what you're seeing here is instead of web content management extending across the board here, we see it as being a bit skinnier. You know, it's just one of the pieces in your engagement stack. Now, what does this mean? Well, this probably bodes poorly for the major platforms like Adobe, and maybe more so for something like Sitecore, but it's problematic for all the all-in-one mega publishing platforms. So the platforms like Drupal and even WordPress. So what's going to happen here is for those enterprises that begin to make this shift, their web content management vendors are going to have to start to play more nicely, if not even take orders from other systems. And the not so great news there is that many of these systems weren't really built to play that nicely with other systems like that. So that's something to certainly be aware of as you look forward and maybe de-emphasize the role of your web content management as an engagement platform. Prediction number 2, we're calling it CRM loses the data store. Now, CRM traditionally has always been the place where you house your core customer and opportunity data. We're seeing this prove to be increasingly difficult to manage and extend and scale. And so what we're seeing in 2018 is this trend that data was moving, or customer data in particular, is moving lower in your marketing stack. So people are saying, can we move data out of our CRM platform and move it lower into our stack so that other of these systems can then take advantage of that customer data as well. So we might have even been able to call this prediction CRM getting skinnier too. So where is that data ultimately residing, if not in your CRM system though? This is a really big trend that we started to see in 2018 and certainly continues in 2019. The rise of this I hesitate to say new, but new-ish, relatively new technology called the customer data platform. And we see it represented in the lower right of this diagram. But the customer data platform is increasingly serving as that single source of truth for your core customer information, feeding all of these other systems of engagement, of which CRM is one, of which web content management was one, of which your email and marketing automation tools and social engagement tools are other ones as well. Next, prediction number 3. Let's talk about the digital experience / customer experience versus the MARTECH gap. Now, there's always been a gap between digital experience and MARTECH. What do I mean by that? Well, think about your organizations. I would venture to guess that your organizations, you have folks who are very campaign oriented, people that are thinking very much around running campaigns in the form of emails, marketing automation campaigns, social campaigns, maybe even sales campaigns. And then you probably have other folks who are more focused on the digital experience or customer experience, and those folks live their lives on the web side of the house, or even the asset side of the house. And what's happened is there's really this divide between those folks who are calling themselves more MarTech people and very campaign oriented versus the digital experience who are more program oriented. Now, this is, like I said, this has always been a divide, but as the potential of finally being able to truly execute on omni-channel promises that we've all been striving for, providing consistent experiences at every single touch point of a customer's life cycle, this gap becomes more important, right? And the people who are thinking of it from a DX/CX perspective need to start thinking in the same ways of the MarTech folks, and vice versa. And it needs to be much more cohesive in order to build these omni-channel experiences that everyone wants to execute on. So in 2019, we think this is when some of these hard decisions are going to have to be made within these enterprises to say, how do we think about this more holistically, as opposed to two separate areas of responsibility. For prediction number 4, let's talk about digital asset management, or DAM. We've been following the DAM space for many years now. I think this is over a decade that we've been following this space at this point. And throughout that time, we've seen new market entrants come on the scene year after year after year. And 2018 was no different. I think we added 4 new digital asset management vendors to our coverage. We're currently in the final stages of our research process on another 2 to 3, if not 4, and we'll be adding those in the next few weeks and months. But this is all to say that there's still new players coming on this market. This is a marketplace that's fairly mature, but we're still getting new market entrants, and we're still getting new market entrants in each of these categories that we described here. Now, that can be good news, and we're certainly I think the number is up over 30 that we're covering right now, and it's continuing to grow, as I mentioned. And we always say that choice from a buyer's perspective is almost always good. Having more choices is almost better, but there's always a risk that you're going to make the wrong decision. So that puts an emphasis on you doing your due diligence to make sure that you have the right solution in place. But we have to reach a point where there might be too many vendors in a particular space, all fighting for the same buyers. And so that's where I'm seeing the possibility of a bubble happen here. I don't know if the bubble's going to burst in 2019, but we're starting to see some of the new entrants come to play that really are providing what I would call more commoditized features. And what happens is a lot of these vendors start to look very similar. And so for some of the vendors that we're seeing on here is that there's not a lot of difference between them, and the differences are subtle. In some cases, it's a fundamental difference that's really critical. In others, it's not that different, and that as an analyst, that concerns me. It feels like something's going to give at that point when the differentiating starts to wane. And like I said, I don't think we're 100% there yet in 2019, but the bubble is building, and I keep seeing that bubble being inflated in 2019, and it'll be more of an issue as we move throughout the year. Now, prediction number 5 is an extension of that problem, I think. In 2018, one of the big themes that we talked about in the digital asset management marketplace was that there's a gap, and a widening gap, between what the vendors you see on the left side of this graphic and the vendors that you see on the right side of this graphic. The vendors on the left are really built for much more complex use cases and scenarios. And oftentimes they're really moving their platforms in a way to power your systems of engagement that we talked about in earlier predictions. We see some very sophisticated organizations using their DAM system to power their assets and their web content system, management system, to power the assets in their emails, to power the assets in their social publishing tools. You know, that single source of truth powering these systems of engagement, so that at every single touch point, you're pulling from that same single source of truth. So that, I say that, you know, that's the more complicated vendors on the left side who are very much focused on that integration story, whereas some of the vendors on the right side are very purpose-built and are very good at what they're doing, but they're not trying to be everything to everyone, and not necessarily trying to power your whole marketing stack. Now, that's a general statement there. Not every single vendor on the right side follows that mantra, but in general, that's what's happening in this marketplace. It's a divide happening. Now, in 2019, I think we're going to see a trend where the simpler vendors and the mid-range vendors start to trend upward, if you will. And so I think they're going to start to challenge some of the use cases that the big guys on the left are solving today, or are trying to solve today. And I think that push from below is going to expose some of the legacy offerings as old and cranky. Now, old and cranky from an architecture perspective, certainly. I think old and cranky from a user interface perspective, we're already seeing signs of that. Some of the new entrants to the marketplace are pretty impressive in the slick, simple UIs that really resonate with a lot of creatives who are using these tools. And I think there's going to be a push from the bottom end of the market and the middle end of the market to push those other guys to really step up their game to meet the needs of the buyers, particularly those creative folks who are expecting something much different than what you might get today. Moving along, prediction number 6 is that CDP, customer data platform that we mentioned earlier. The profusion of CDPs in the marketplace leads to a lot of confusion. Now, as I mentioned in one of the earlier predictions, the CDP area is a hot area for marketers today. It seems like everyone's asking about, where should my golden customer record reside? And as such, there's been a huge proliferation of CDP vendors that have come on the scene. Now, you can see on this graphic here, we have the big guys on the left that are slowly getting into the CDP marketplace, some faster than others. But on the right, there's a ton of pure play CDP vendors out there, all trying to be your customer record vendor. And some of these have been around for a little bit and have kind of evolved to this point, and others are coming on the scene every day. We continue to add more and more vendors into this area. But like any marketplace, but in particular this newer, immature marketplace, the lines around what a CDP vendor does and what they don't do are blurry. We're seeing different CDP vendors start to say, all right, well, we can be more than just the golden record. Maybe we can help you build your journeys, and so they're treading on what we see from another category, the journey orchestration engines, or JOEs, if you will. They're taking on some of the JOE functionality and building that into their CDP platforms. We're seeing them also say, hey, well, we can help you with your email, because that's a main touch point, and they're treading on what you might get from an ESP. They might also really start to push you in the way of becoming more personalized, and so personalization engine functionality are now making its way back into the CDP. And likewise, other vendors are building in CDP functionality. So, data management platforms, the traditional DMPs, or even the journey orchestration engines, or the DXPs. They're starting to say, well, we do all these other services. Why can't we take in some of the customer data platform services as well? So lots changing here. A lot of confusing messaging from these vendors. A lot of conflicting statements that are happening here, and organizations are experimenting and are forced to make some tough decisions. And that's hard when we're talking about your golden customer record, because everyone wants to get that right, so that then you can go and create those experiences that you want to and make sure you're reaching the right people with the right message. Prediction number 7 is around Microsoft's Office 365 Teams. So our prediction for 2019 is that Office 365 Teams becomes the new Outlook. So, Microsoft has certainly focused intently on Teams for the Office 365 platform. We'd say somewhat to the detriment of SharePoint and Yammer and Groups, but we expect Microsoft Teams to be their attempt to create a new default dashboard, if you will, to replace Outlook as the always-on reference location for all of your knowledge workers. Now, sounds good, but this is potentially problematic because what we've seen traditionally from the Teams group and from Microsoft is that they haven't been historically great on the UX side of the house. And they tend to work fairly independently from the rest of the suite. So that could cause some disruption to your enterprise digital workplace. Maybe for the better, but in many cases, it might be a step back for many folks, and they might get frustrated with what they're getting from there. So it's something to watch in 2019 as Microsoft at least is positioning themselves as to be your go-to communication tool, replacing Outlook potentially. Prediction number 8 is around marketing tools in general. You might hear from marketing software vendors that they often say that marketing is marketing. They're not necessarily wrong, but there's a massive difference when it comes to B2B marketing versus B2C marketing. And we have seen those marketing tools that were built for the B2B audience in mind were built fundamentally differently from those that were built from B2C constituency in mind. And so we've seen a lot of buyers and potential buyers struggle with getting systems that were fundamentally built more to a B2B audience to work for the B2C world, and vice versa. In the B2B world, it's all about leads and opportunity and scoring of leads and creating drip campaigns and understanding where they came from and building campaigns based on accounts and tying that back to your Salesforce automation and whatnot. Whereas on the B2C world, it's all about an individual's journey and building loyalty and making sure you're hitting them with the right brand message at every every step in that journey. Now, of course, there are some commonalities. We always want to be able to attribute where our leads and customers have come from. We want to give as personalized message as possible. We want consistent experiences across every channel and every touch point. So there are some commonalities there, and I think that's where the vendors are. When they say marketing is marketing, that's the stuff that they're really talking about. But if you're buying marketing technology in 2019, you really need to be aware of this gulf in the marketing technology marketplace. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to do B2B? Are you trying to do B2C? Are you trying to do both? And if so, find the tools that were fundamentally built to satisfy those use cases. Next up is prediction number 9. And here we're saying that marketing operations goes mainstream again. Now, for some of you, marketing operations is probably not a new terminology. We say again because marketing operations really grew up in the era of advertising and direct mail. But in the omnichannel digital era, we're seeing marketing ops become the phrase du jour. And what is in an omni-channel marketing operations hub can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but there's actually a bunch of technology marketplaces that kind of fall in this category, and a lot of enterprises in 2019 are trying to figure out what the right blend is for their omni-channel operations hubs. Are you looking at things like marketing resource management? Is it simply just campaign management? What about creative operations? Like what goes into the process of building all your creative assets throughout their and managing them through their life cycle. And then what about content operations? You know, we think about digital asset management, but then we also think about what about all the content that gets used at every different touch point, and that fuels your content marketing initiatives. So people are really thinking about what happens before things are final, what happens when they are final, and how do we measure how successful they are, all from a hub perspective. And I think we're going to see more and more of this as, you know, as we talk about all these other predictions of people thinking more about getting that right content to the right person at the right time in an omni-channel mentality. People are going to want a single hub to be able to see how are we doing, what's working, what's not working, how can we manage this better. And finally, our number 10 prediction is around the marketing and engagement cloud religious wars we anticipate intensifying in 2019. Now, I'm sure everyone on this call has at least investigated a marketing, some offering from a marketing cloud vendor. There are lots of cloud vendors out there available to you in 2019. You know, certainly from the biggest names in the software industry, they're all putting enormous investment into their marketing clouds. You know, the Adobes, the Salesforce, the Oracles, the IBMs. And where we see the wars happening, though, is some of our biggest subscribers are telling us that they're seeing inevitably they're ending up with multiple clouds. You know, it's actually fairly uncommon these days to see an enterprise that has been able to just completely solidify their marketing efforts on one cloud. And if they have, there's always exceptions to those rules. And unfortunately, one of the reasons we're predicting some wars to intensify here is that we're hearing from our subscribers that when they go to one of their cloud vendors and say, hey, we have this other cloud vendor under our roof as well, we want you to play nice and pass some information between the two. In some cases, the vendors come back and saying, no, we won't work with that other cloud vendor, and we have no plan to do so. There are some exceptions where some are playing nicer than others, but some of the biggest ones are refusing to play nice with each other, and I think that is going to cause some real angst and anxiety among marketers, because you've already made these investments in these clouds. There's some really important content and data in these clouds, and if you're forced to choose one over another, that's going to be painful, and that kind of migration is always painful. So I think there's going to be some like I said, angst and anxiety going forward in 2019 around aligning with a marketing cloud, or even some organizations are saying, well, maybe we can do this from a best of breed perspective ourselves. Maybe we can create our own clouds. Maybe we don't want to go with one of the big names in the industry. So there's a lot of options for you. Everyone's trying to find the right mix for them, and I think there's going to be some clashes along the way. Stay tuned for that. So with that said, I think we can wrap up and say that, well, with my final prediction. The final prediction is that many of you, because there's so many of you on this call, I imagine that you're all trying to figure out what's going on in the digital marketing and digital workplace technology worlds. And my prediction is that many of you will be selecting vendors in 2019. And if you are about to do that, if there's any way we can help, we'd love to help. And so I predict that some of you should go get a free research chapter. And we offer this to all of our folks, all of our readers who want to get a sense of what our analysis really looks like. In any of the areas that we talked about today, in any of those 9 areas that are 9 coverage areas, our 9 marketplaces that we're following on an ongoing basis, you can get a free chapter that gives you an entire breakdown of a single vendor. And you'll see that we don't pull any punches. You know, we think we have the hardest hitting analysis out there, and it's because of our business model that we don't have to pull any punches. We're not beholden to vendors, and we'll tell it like it is, and we hope to give you what we like to call the real story. And then in addition to the chapters themselves, I want you to try these tools. The Real Quadrants quadrant shortlist generator, the real-time vendor comparison tool, and the real score effectiveness model. We built Real Quadrant so that you can get a custom quadrant that meets your needs. So that it's not a single snapshot view of the marketplace. It's something that is absolutely designed to give you the right shortlist for what it is you are trying to do. We built the real-time vendor comparison tools to be able to allow you to compare vendors head to head and see what they're good at and what they're not good at. And then we built the real score effectiveness model to say, how are you doing? How are you doing in your journey? Are you ahead of your peers? Are you behind your peers? Or are you doing what you should, and what should you be focusing on next? So we hope these tools help. We built them for you. Like I said, we don't work for vendors. We work for you. Thank you so much for all of your support in 2018 and the last 18 years. We look forward to helping you all in 2019. Feel free to reach out to us at any time and let us know how we can help. Thank you all for joining me today. Happy New Year. We'll talk down the road.